You won't believe what happened when everything you thought you knew about loss and loyalty shattered in one fateful moment. In a quiet suburban cul-de-sac on the edge of a town where every day was a mirror of the one before, a small dog named Shadow vanished without a trace, leaving behind an emptiness that would haunt every heartbeat. Shadow wasn't just any pet, he was the pulse in Thomas's otherwise ordinary life, the silent companion who made even the dullest afternoons bloom with unexpected joy. That day had begun like any other, with the gentle hum of routine and the familiar clink of a coffee cup against the saucer. Thomas, a reserved man known for his steady manner and thoughtful eyes, stepped outside into a golden afternoon. The sun was setting, splashing the sky with hues of amber and lilac, when he called out for Shadow. But the usual soft bark never came. Instead, an eerie silence replaced the comforting sound that had always greeted him at the door. In that brief, heart-stopping moment, reality twisted. Shadow was gone. Thomas retraced their usual path through the neighborhood park, a place where old trees whispered secrets of decades past and the worn bench by the fountain stood as a testament to simpler times. Every step along the familiar sidewalk felt like a descent into a nightmare that had seized his soul. The comforting routine they had shared was now broken, replaced by the relentless throb of unanswered questions. How could a creature so full of life simply disappear into thin air? Days bled into weeks. Flyers bearing Shadow's picture fluttered on telephone poles, and the community's quiet solidarity morphed into desperate action. Yet, with every passing hour, the hope that Shadow might bound back through the door dimmed. Thomas wandered the streets, his eyes desperately scanning each passerby, each fleeting silhouette against the fading light, as if the answer might lie in a chance glimpse of amber eyes and a wagging tail. Then, nearly a month after that fateful day, something utterly unexpected shattered the monotonous grief. While rummaging through old boxes in a neighbor's attic, a place thick with memories and the musk of nostalgia, Thomas uncovered a faded photograph. In it, Shadow was not in the familiar setting of his suburban life, but in a bustling urban sprawl. The image, captured under the neon glare of towering billboards and the chaotic energy of a city that never slept, sent a shockwave through Thomas's numbed heart. The accompanying handwritten note, scrawled in hurried ink, hinted at a location thousands of miles away, a place where the mundane collided with the extraordinary. In that electrifying instant, Thomas's loss transformed into an international mystery. The realization that Shadow might have wandered far beyond the confines of his once safe world ignited a turbulent mix of hope and terror. With the photograph burning a hole in his pocket and determination stealing his resolve, Thomas embarked on a journey that would lead him deep into the heart of an unfamiliar, sprawling metropolis. Arriving in the city was like stepping into a parallel universe, a frenetic landscape of neon and concrete that pulsed with life even in the dead of night. The air vibrated with a mix of possibility and menace. Here, in the labyrinthine streets and secret corners of the urban expanse, Thomas encountered an undercurrent of whispers among pet lovers, animal rescuers, and everyday citizens. In hushed tones and over steaming cups of coffee in dim, cramped cafes, people spoke of an illicit network that trafficked in lost souls, animals ripped away from their safe havens and forced into a world of exploitation and hidden agendas. Every conversation hinted at a darker underbelly lurking beneath the city's gleaming surface. Despite the city's relentless chaos, Thomas pressed forward with a single-minded determination. His search took him through the shadowed corridors of run-down neighborhoods, across rain-slicked alleyways, and into unexpected havens of warmth amid the urban chill. During these long days, and even longer nights, Thomas's mind oscillated between vivid recollections of quiet mornings with Shadow and the cold, harsh reality of his present quest. The contrast was stark, memories of playful chases in sunlit parks versus the relentless, heart-tugging uncertainty of a stranger's city. Every step he took in this alien world was imbued with a bittersweet urgency, the hope that somewhere in the clamor of the unfamiliar, his beloved friend awaited discovery. One rainy evening, as the city's neon glow blurred into shimmering puddles on cracked sidewalks, Thomas found himself on a desolate street corner. The rain hammered down with an intensity that made every breath feel like a struggle, and the sound of water on concrete was the only companion to his racing thoughts. It was here that, amid the staccato rhythm of raindrops, he encountered a man whose eyes reflected a profound weariness, a mirror of Thomas's own haunted expression. The stranger's voice was low and gravelly, as though it carried the weight of countless lost hopes. He spoke quietly about a pet taken under mysterious circumstances, his words etched with the sorrow of a man who had once dared to hope. In that brief exchange, Thomas realized he was not alone in his relentless pursuit. The shared grief and mutual understanding forged an unspoken bond between the two men, a connection that only deepened the enigma of Shadow's disappearance. For Thomas, every new piece of information was a double-edged sword. The more he learned about the clandestine networks operating in the city, the more the lines between the familiar and the unknown blurred. Rumors swirled like the autumn leaves in the wind, stories of pets smuggled across borders, of loving companions lost to the machinations of unseen forces. Each fragment of gossip painted a picture of a world where the most cherished bonds could be ripped away in a heartbeat, leaving behind scars that time could never heal. And yet, amid this tapestry of despair and fragmented hope, Thomas clung to the belief that Shadow was out there, waiting to be found. The city, with all its glaring contradictions, became both a battleground and a sanctuary. The quiet, personal grief that Thomas carried was interwoven with the larger, more chaotic narrative of urban life. Here, in the interplay of light and darkness, every encounter, every fleeting smile or word of sympathy, served as a reminder that even in the midst of overwhelming loss, there was still a spark of humanity to be found. But beneath that spark lay an ever-present tension, a feeling that the truth was as elusive as it was inevitable. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city transformed into a tapestry of shimmering lights and restless shadows, Thomas would find himself standing in solitude, lost in memories of Shadow's gentle presence. The soft rustle of leaves on familiar suburban streets, the comforting murmur of a quiet conversation, all seemed like distant echoes of a life that had once been. Yet, even as despair threatened to overtake him, there remained an undeniable undercurrent of hope, a fragile, trembling promise that this journey, as perilous as it was, might one day lead to a reunion that could mend the shattered fragments of his existence. In the crowded anonymity of the metropolis, Thomas's quest felt both deeply personal and disturbingly expansive. Every alley, every dimly lit storefront, became a potential repository of lost memories and hidden truths. The city's relentless pace served as a stark contrast to the slow, painful process of healing that he endured with each passing day. And though the search was mired in uncertainty and fraught with unexpected dangers, it was also punctuated by moments of profound clarity, brief instants when the truth, like a ray of sunlight through storm clouds, illuminated the path ahead. Amid the urban sprawl, Thomas's inner world was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. There was the searing pain of loss, a raw, unfiltered grief that gnawed at him with every step, and the stubborn, almost defiant spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. This tumultuous mix of emotions, so palpable in every gesture and every word, gave his journey a relentless, almost maddening urgency. In the midst of a city that thrived on transient moments and fleeting encounters, his search for Shadow was a long, slow battle against the tide of time and forgetfulness. Every night, as the city settled into its restless slumber, Thomas would sit alone on a park bench beneath a flickering street lamp. The cool night air, heavy with the scent of rain and damp pavement, would envelope him, and in those moments, he allowed himself to remember. He remembered the sound of Shadow's paws padding softly on the wooden floor of his small home, the way the dog's eyes sparkled with unspoken affection, and the warmth of his presence on lonely nights. These recollections, tender yet tormenting, were the fuel that kept him moving forward, even when the darkness threatened to swallow him whole. And so, with every step taken on rain-soaked streets and every whispered lead shared in secret gatherings, Thomas's search stretched farther than he ever imagined. The mystery of Shadow's disappearance was no longer confined to the borders of a small town. It had become a sprawling enigma that defied logic and reason, reaching out across cities and borders, entwining his fate with that of a world he scarcely recognized. Yet even as the magnitude of the quest grew, so too did the determination etched in every line of Thomas's face, a determination born of love, loss, and the desperate need to reclaim a piece of his soul that had been torn away. In that endless pursuit, every encounter, every whispered conversation, carried with it the promise of revelation, a promise that the truth, however painful, would someday break through the impenetrable walls of uncertainty. Thomas's journey had transformed from a simple search for a missing pet into a profound exploration of the fragility of trust and the enduring power of memory. And as the urban night stretched on, the city's unyielding pulse continued to beat around him, a constant reminder that the answers lay hidden somewhere in the interplay of light and shadow. As the rain began to ease and the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, Thomas paused on a quiet street corner, his heart still heavy with both longing and cautious hope. In that suspended moment, with the neon glimmers of the night dissolving into the soft light of morning, the promise of a reunion, shrouded in equal measures of heartache and redemption, seemed both tantalizingly near and achingly distant. The memory of Shadow, vivid and unyielding, fueled his determination to press on, even as the city's secrets loomed like silent sentinels in the early light. And so, with a quiet, resolute step into the uncertainty of a new day, Thomas continued his search, a solitary figure navigating a vast and indifferent city, driven by the unbreakable bond of love and the hope that one day, the lost pieces of his life might be gathered together again. Thomas pressed on through the labyrinthine maze of the city's darker corridors, where neon lights struggled to pierce the inky gloom and every corner promised both hope and despair. The relentless drizzle had given way to a cold, steady rain that soaked him to the bone, each drop a silent echo of his mounting anxiety. The urban landscape, a collage of gleaming high-rises and decaying brick walls, bore the scars of secrets hidden deep within its veins. His footsteps echoed on slick sidewalks as he moved with a determined urgency, the memory of Shadow propelling him forward even as the night grew thicker with uncertainty. He recalled the whispered hints shared by strangers in murky cafes and the furtive glances exchanged in dimly lit alleys. Each conversation, punctuated by the clatter of cups and the low hum of the city, had seeded in him a belief that there was a clandestine network behind the disappearance of lost pets. A network so ruthless that it operated in the interstices of urban life, preying on the vulnerability of trust and the sanctity of companionship. The more Thomas learned, the more the city seemed to reveal its dual nature, one face soft and familiar, and the other raw, jagged, and unforgiving. Late one night, while navigating a narrow lane flanked by shuttered storefronts, Thomas's gaze fell upon a small, inconspicuous building adorned with peeling paint and a flickering sign that read Pet Haven. Its appearance was deceivingly benign, a relic of bygone days that once offered refuge to stray animals. The building's facade exuded an air of melancholy, as if it held onto the memories of those who had passed through its doors. Driven by a mix of desperation and hope, Thomas stepped inside, where the muted light revealed rows of battered cages and faded photographs of animals whose eyes told silent stories of neglect and longing. Inside that modest space, the air was thick with the scent of aged paper and a faint trace of antiseptic. A lone figure, an elderly woman with sorrow etched deeply into every line of her face, sat behind a counter cluttered with medical supplies and old newspapers. Without preamble, she greeted Thomas with a voice that was soft but laden with unspoken grief. "I remember him," she murmured, as though speaking of an old friend. Her eyes flickered with recognition as she recounted a time when a small, spirited dog had arrived here, lost and frightened. Her recollection was tinted with sadness, a wistful narrative of an animal spirited away from a life of familiarity into the harsh clutches of a world that had no place for tenderness. As she spoke, Thomas's heart tightened. The details she offered were fragmented yet unmistakable, a description of a journey, of a small creature caught in the crossfire of human greed and desperation. There was mention of a passageway, hidden behind an unassuming door in an abandoned warehouse, through which lost pets were transported, their fate sealed by the cruelty of an underground trade. The woman hesitated, her hands trembling as she traced a path on the counter with a calloused finger. It wasn't just about profit, she confided, her voice dropping to a whisper. It was about control. They took them, and in doing so, they took a piece of our souls. Thomas absorbed every word, the narrative weaving itself into the fabric of his own grief. Here was a clue, an intersection between his personal nightmare and a broader, darker reality that lurked beneath the city's surface. The revelation stirred an anger within him, a burning determination to expose the injustice that had so mercilessly torn his life asunder. He questioned the woman further, his voice a mixture of raw emotion and restrained resolve, probing for details about the warehouse, the route these illicit transactions followed, and any hint of who might be orchestrating such an operation. But the woman, caught in the web of her own painful memories, offered only cryptic directions and a warning: be careful. The truth in this city isn't always what it seems. Sometimes, the shadows have eyes that watch your every step. Armed with that unsettling guidance, Thomas left Pet Haven with a heavy heart and a mind racing with possibilities. The city's sprawling network of streets now appeared to him as a giant, living organism, each alleyway a dark artery pulsating with secrets, each intersection a crossroads of fate and fortune. Determined to follow every lead, he retraced the woman's vague directions to an old industrial district on the outskirts of the central urban sprawl. The district was a grim reminder of a past era, one where factories belched smoke into a perpetually overcast sky and the ground was littered with remnants of shattered dreams. The decay of this place stood in stark contrast to the vibrancy of downtown, its every shadow hinting at forgotten stories of exploitation and loss. In this desolate quarter, Thomas encountered a group of locals gathered around a flickering street lamp outside an abandoned warehouse. Their conversation was low and guarded, filled with half-spoken rumors and a shared wariness of being overheard. As he approached, one of them, a man with weary eyes and a scar that ran along his cheek, nodded cautiously in his direction. "You're looking for someone," the man said softly, as if addressing a ghost. His words were laced with the bitter truth of his own scars, a life spent navigating the underbelly of a city that had long forgotten the value of innocence. "You're chasing a ghost, just like all of us here." The man, whose name was revealed to be Adrian, had once been a part of the very network Thomas now sought to dismantle. Adrian's voice carried the weight of regret and hard-won experience as he detailed his escape from the clutches of those who trafficked in lost souls. "They prey on the lonely, the desperate," Adrian explained, his eyes scanning the darkened faces of his companions. "When you lose something dear, like a loyal friend, it opens a door. And once that door is open, the darkness sees an opportunity." His words, though softly spoken, resonated with a profound melancholy, and in them, Thomas sensed a kinship born of shared loss and unyielding determination. Adrian recounted the underground network's operations with a precision that was both chilling and enlightening. He described a series of clandestine meetings held in nondescript locations, a rundown motel on the outskirts of the district, a hidden basement beneath an abandoned church, and even a secluded rooftop garden in the heart of the city, where the illicit exchange of hope and despair took place under the cover of night. Each location was a chapter in a grim narrative of exploitation, a testament to the lengths to which those in power would go to control and commodify the intangible bonds between humans and their pets. As he spoke, Thomas felt the gravity of the situation press upon him. This was no longer merely a personal quest for a missing dog, it had evolved into a confrontation with a vast, unrelenting machine of corruption that thrived on the suffering of those too vulnerable to resist. Determined to unravel this sinister web, Thomas decided to visit one of the locations Adrian had mentioned, a dilapidated motel that lay on the fringe of the industrial district. The motel's exterior was a patchwork of fading signs and cracked windows, its interior equally uninviting, with hallways that stretched on like corridors of forgotten dreams. In one room, lit by the sickly glow of a single, bare bulb, Thomas found evidence of clandestine activity, faded photographs, handwritten notes, and a tattered map that charted a course leading to an abandoned warehouse near the heart of the district. The map was cryptic, its annotations resembling the desperate scrawl of someone who had lost all hope yet clung to the idea that redemption was still possible. As he pieced together the fragments of information, Thomas felt a surge of conflicting emotions, a mingling of hope, rage, and profound sorrow. Every clue was a reminder of how deeply the undercurrents of human cruelty and neglect could run, and every revelation added a layer of complexity to his already tumultuous journey. His mind drifted to memories of Shadow, whose bright eyes and warm presence had once filled his life with uncomplicated joy. The thought of that innocence, now tainted by the harsh realities of exploitation and greed, stung him deeply, intensifying his resolve to bring an end to this cycle of abuse. In the midst of this maelstrom of emotions, Thomas experienced fleeting moments of surreal clarity. On one such occasion, as he wandered through a narrow, graffiti-strewn alley behind the motel, the echo of a familiar bark jolted him from his reverie. His heart skipped a beat, and for a brief, heart-wrenching moment, he believed he heard the unmistakable sound of Shadow's presence. But when he turned the corner, there was nothing, only the haunting emptiness of the abandoned alley, where shadows danced in the flickering light and every sound was swallowed by the relentless hum of the city. The moment passed as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a lingering ache and a reaffirmed determination that every sound, every whisper in the night, might be a thread leading him closer to the truth. As the days bled together in a series of sleepless nights and restless pursuits, Thomas found himself grappling with the duality of his existence. The contrast between the tender memories of a lost friend and the brutal reality of the network he sought to expose grew ever more pronounced. At times, the city seemed to mock him with its indifferent beauty, its dazzling skyline a constant reminder that life went on, indifferent to the suffering of a solitary man chasing ghosts. And yet, amidst the cold indifference, there were sparks of kindness, a fleeting smile from a stranger in a crowded bus station, a word of encouragement whispered by a local shopkeeper, each a small beacon of hope in a landscape marred by despair. Every new lead, every hidden clue, added another layer to the sprawling mosaic of Thomas's investigation. The information gathered from the motel and the whispered testimonies of those who had once been part of the underground trade painted a picture of a vast, sprawling network operating in plain sight. The revelation that lost pets were being funneled through a series of carefully orchestrated checkpoints, each one a twisted blend of mundane transactions and calculated cruelty, fueled his determination to dig deeper. With every piece of evidence, the stakes grew higher, and the realization that the forces behind this nefarious operation were far more insidious than he had ever imagined began to sink in. In the cold light of dawn, as Thomas scribbled notes in a small, battered notebook on a park bench, the city around him stirred with a quiet resilience. The interplay of light and shadow on the pavement served as a reminder that even in the darkest corners of urban decay, there existed the possibility of redemption. He clung to that fragile hope, knowing that each step, no matter how arduous or painful, brought him closer to a truth that had eluded him for so long. With the evidence mounting and his resolve hardened by both the beauty and brutality of the world he navigated, Thomas prepared himself for the next phase of his journey. The abandoned warehouse marked on the tattered map beckoned like a forbidden portal into a realm where every shadow concealed a secret and every creak of the floorboard hinted at untold stories. In that derelict structure, it was said, the final pieces of the puzzle might lie hidden, a revelation that could either reunite him with his beloved Shadow or shatter the remnants of hope he had so painstakingly built. In that silent, haunted moment before he set out once more, Thomas paused to gather his thoughts. The storm of emotions that had carried him through countless sleepless nights was momentarily stilled by the resolute beat of his heart, a heartbeat that echoed the promise of reunion, redemption, and the bitter taste of truth. As he stepped into the murky unknown, leaving behind the fleeting comfort of fleeting connections and the grim familiarity of urban decay, he carried with him the memory of every whispered secret, every fleeting moment of kindness, and the unwavering belief that somewhere in the tangled web of despair, there lay a chance to reclaim what had been lost. The city, with its relentless pace and unyielding shadows, stretched out before him, a vast, indifferent expanse where hope and heartache intertwined in a dance as old as time. And as Thomas merged once more with the ceaseless flow of its streets, his journey was far from over. Every step was a pledge, every heartbeat a promise, that he would uncover the truth behind the disappearance, no matter how deep or dark the trail might lead. Thomas approached the abandoned warehouse with a measured blend of trepidation and determination. The building, a hulking relic of a once bustling industrial era, stood as a monument to forgotten labor and fractured promises. Its rusted metal doors creaked in protest as he pushed them open, the sound echoing like a warning through vast, empty corridors. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and stale memories, every step stirring up echoes of footsteps from the past. The space was dimly lit by stray shafts of daylight that filtered through broken windows, creating long, distorted shadows that danced along the walls. Thomas moved slowly, his every sense on high alert. He recalled Adrian's cryptic words and the chilling accounts of clandestine meetings, now all converging in this forsaken place. His mind wandered to memories of Shadow, small, brave, and unburdened by the cruelty of a world that could so casually discard love. The thought spurred him forward into the labyrinth of abandoned machinery and scattered debris. As he ventured deeper, Thomas discovered a narrow staircase leading to an upper level. With cautious steps, he climbed into a space that had once served as an office, its windows shattered and its furnishings covered in layers of dust and neglect. Amid the ruin, a series of photographs pinned to a bulletin board caught his eye. They depicted a series of pets in various states of distress, faces that bore the unmistakable spark of life, yet marred by fear and uncertainty. Among them was a small dog, unmistakably Shadow, captured in a moment of calm before turmoil. The image, though faded, was a jarring reminder that the story of loss was not confined to his own experience, but echoed through the lives of many who had fallen prey to this covert network. Thomas's heart pounded in his chest as he carefully removed one of the photos, his hands trembling as he studied every detail. The background hinted at a modest home setting, a stark contrast to the grim environment that now surrounded him. It was as though the photograph was a bridge between two worlds, the ordinary, tender life he once knew and the darker undercurrents that had now emerged. The juxtaposition filled him with a bitter sense of irony and a renewed urgency to uncover the truth behind these covert transactions. A soft creak behind him made him spin around. In the doorway stood a young woman, her expression etched with a blend of sorrow and resolve. Without preamble, she introduced herself as Elena, a former employee of the underground operation who had escaped its clutches after witnessing too many betrayals. Her voice was steady but low, as if every word cost her a piece of her soul. Elena explained that the warehouse was not merely a storage facility for stolen lives, but a central node in a sprawling network that trafficked in desperation and shattered dreams. The photographs were part of a collection she had risked everything to compile, a silent testament to the cruelty inflicted upon innocent animals and the silent complicity of those who turned a blind eye. Elena's revelations painted a portrait of a world operating in plain sight, where those entrusted with care had become complicit in a trade that commodified love. She recounted moments of quiet horror, the subtle manipulation of desperate pet owners, the carefully orchestrated schemes that diverted lost animals into a labyrinth of profit and neglect, and the systemic failure that allowed such a network to thrive under the veneer of everyday life. As she spoke, Thomas felt a surge of both anger and pity, a visceral reaction to the injustice that had so deeply intertwined with his personal tragedy. Their conversation was punctuated by the distant hum of the city beyond the warehouse walls, a reminder that life, with all its mundane routines and fleeting connections, continued unabated even as dark secrets festered in the hidden corners. Thomas and Elena pored over scattered documents and hastily scribbled notes, piecing together the intricate web that connected local abductions to international rings of illicit trade. Every piece of evidence, no matter how inconspicuous, added weight to their resolve and etched a clearer outline of the network's operations. At one point, Elena led him to a concealed room tucked away behind a false wall, a room that had served as an administrative hub. Inside, rows of ledgers, communication logs, and coded messages lay abandoned, silent witnesses to a conspiracy that had robbed countless families of their beloved companions. Thomas's eyes traced the faded ink on the brittle pages, absorbing the stark details of transactions that spoke of calculated indifference. It was in these documents that he found a thread connecting his own desperate search to a broader tapestry of pain and exploitation, a connection that extended far beyond the loss of a single dog. Every revelation in that room stirred a mix of emotions in Thomas, the raw sting of betrayal, the unyielding need for justice, and a profound sadness for the lives marred by the shadow of this covert trade. As he carefully gathered the documents, he could almost hear the whispers of all those who had suffered, the quiet laments of pet owners, the silent cries of lost animals, and the echoes of a community that had once believed in the sanctity of trust. In that moment, standing amidst the remnants of clandestine operations, Thomas vowed to honor Shadow's memory by exposing the truth. The weight of his promise pressed heavily on him, as tangible and unyielding as the cold concrete underfoot. Elena's presence provided both a grounding force and a painful reminder that the journey ahead would be fraught with peril, an unrelenting struggle against a system that thrived on the exploitation of the vulnerable. With the early morning light seeping through the broken windows, Thomas and Elena made a silent pact. They would take the evidence they had uncovered and bring it to light, even if it meant venturing further into the dangerous heart of the network. The warehouse, once a symbol of desolation and despair, had become the crucible of their shared determination, a place where the seeds of retribution were sown amidst the rubble of broken lives. As they stepped out of the warehouse and into the cool, awakening dawn, the city's vast, indifferent expanse stretched before them. The quiet murmur of early commuters and the gentle rustle of leaves in the soft light stood in stark contrast to the tumultuous revelations of the night. Yet, for Thomas, every step forward was imbued with an undeniable purpose, a pledge to recover not only the physical remnants of a lost life, but also the shattered fragments of hope that could still, perhaps, be reassembled. In the lingering silence of that fragile morning, as the weight of the evidence mingled with the soft promise of a new day, Thomas felt a resolute clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, its every turn fraught with the potential for further heartache and danger. But within the quiet determination of his soul, a spark of defiance had ignited, a promise that no matter how deep the shadows, the light of truth would eventually prevail. The chill of the early morning had barely lifted as Thomas and Elena stepped away from the warehouse, their pockets heavy with damning evidence and their minds burdened with more questions than answers. The city was stirring to life, its streets awash with the soft golden hues of sunrise that belied the dark undercurrents coursing beneath its surface. Every step they took felt like a stride into the unknown, an uncharted territory where every whisper of the wind carried secrets of lives shattered and promises broken. As they moved through the awakening urban landscape, Elena's quiet resolve anchored them in a reality that was as unforgiving as it was unyielding. They headed towards a nondescript bus station on the edge of town, a transient crossroads where the lost and the desperate converged. The station, with its cracked pavement and faded advertisements, was a stark reminder that even in places that seemed abandoned by hope, life fought to persist. It was here that a new lead awaited them, whispered by a jittery informant who had risked everything to share a fragment of forbidden knowledge. The informant, a wiry man with eyes darting like nervous fireflies, recounted his own harrowing tale of betrayal and subterfuge. He spoke in hushed tones about an upcoming rendezvous at an old, decommissioned bus depot, a location reputed to be a secondary hub for the illicit trafficking of beloved pets. According to his account, the depot was not merely a transit point, it was a nexus where the network's true scale unfurled, a place where lives were bartered like commodities under the indifferent glow of industrial lighting. His words were laced with urgency and regret, each syllable a stark reminder of the ruthless efficiency of those who had once pulled the strings of this grim operation. Driven by a renewed sense of purpose, Thomas and Elena set off toward the depot, the weight of their mission pressing down like an oppressive fog. As they navigated narrow back streets and dimly lit alleys, the urban scenery morphed into a labyrinth of forgotten architecture and whispered despair. The bus depot, when it finally emerged from the gloom, was a cavernous relic of a bygone era, its vast interior punctuated by long-forgotten echoes and the faint, melancholic hum of an old ventilation system. Here, under the harsh glare of flickering fluorescent lights, the duo began to piece together a puzzle that spanned cities and shattered hearts. Inside the depot, every surface told a story. Rusting benches, their paint peeled away by time, lined the walls where once a community of weary travelers had found solace. Graffiti, like a tapestry of defiant art, covered the concrete pillars, each tag and scribble a silent protest against the decay of modern society. It was in this setting, a space where beauty and despair entwined, that Thomas discovered a series of cryptic notes taped to a grimy pillar. The notes, scrawled in an erratic hand, spoke of clandestine transfers and coded meeting times. They hinted at a next stop, a remote location far removed from the familiar urban sprawl, where the network's grip might finally be loosened. Thomas's mind raced with the implications of the messages. Each new clue was a double-edged sword, offering both hope and a deeper plunge into danger. Memories of Shadow flooded back, the warm, comforting weight of his small body against Thomas's leg during quiet evenings, the soft wine of contentment that had once filled the corners of his world. Now, that same memory became the beacon that guided his relentless pursuit of truth, even as the shadows grew longer and the city's secrets threatened to engulf him entirely. Elena, with her steady gaze and unwavering determination, filled in the gaps with what little she knew. She explained how the network had expanded its operations over the years, morphing into a sophisticated and elusive entity. The notes pointed to a rendezvous at an isolated industrial park on the outskirts of the city, a place that seemed almost otherworldly in its abandonment, a silent testament to forgotten ambitions. Together, they resolved to follow this treacherous trail, aware that each step forward might bring them closer to the truth, or plunge them into deeper peril. Navigating through rain-slicked streets and desolate neighborhoods, Thomas felt the pulse of the city in every footstep, a rhythm that was at once both hypnotic and harrowing. The urban sprawl, with its chaotic blend of hope and desolation, served as a constant reminder of how fragile the bonds of trust and love could be. Every face in the crowd, every fleeting smile exchanged between strangers, was a reminder that beneath the veneer of normalcy, countless hearts were beating in quiet desperation. In the quiet moments between their pursuit and the intermittent bursts of adrenaline, Thomas found himself reflecting on the profound irony of his quest. The search for Shadow, a search born out of a deeply personal loss, had evolved into a crusade against an insidious network that preyed on the very essence of human compassion. The journey had stripped him bare, revealing the raw edges of his soul and the depths of his capacity for hope amid overwhelming despair. And as he walked side by side with Elena, their silent camaraderie a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty, he felt the spark of something fragile yet unyielding, a belief that even in the darkest corridors of exploitation, redemption might still be found. Their footsteps eventually led them to the outskirts of the industrial park, a barren stretch of land where nature struggled to reclaim its dominion over man-made ruins. Here, the silence was profound, broken only by the distant call of a lone bird or the whisper of wind through abandoned structures. The sense of isolation was palpable, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the city they had left behind. Yet, in this solitude, Thomas sensed that the final pieces of the puzzle might be waiting to be unearthed, a truth hidden in plain sight, masked by layers of neglect and conspiracy. As the day edged toward twilight, the industrial park took on an eerie, almost surreal quality. Shadows lengthened, and the sky was painted in muted strokes of violet and indigo, as if mourning the loss of countless untold stories. In this liminal space between day and night, Thomas and Elena prepared for the next phase of their investigation, a confrontation with the forces that had turned the simple act of companionship into a commodity. With hearts steeled by the weight of their discoveries and minds alert to every potential threat, they pressed forward, determined to expose the dark underbelly of a system that had stolen so much from so many. Every step, every whispered revelation, brought them closer to a truth that was as elusive as it was vital, a truth that might just lead them to Shadow, or at the very least, to an understanding of the monstrous network that had upended their lives. The industrial park, with its crumbling facades and haunted silence, stood as the final barrier between the familiar world of lost love and the abyss of corruption. And in that suspended moment, as the night deepened and the first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, Thomas and Elena vowed that nothing, no matter how perilous or heart-wrenching, would keep them from unraveling the mystery that had forever altered the course of their lives. Thomas and Elena stood before the imposing, graffiti-marred warehouse that loomed at the edge of the industrial park, a monolith of rusted metal and shattered glass that seemed to absorb every stray beam of light. The building's facade, battered by years of neglect, bore silent witness to countless secrets locked within its decaying walls. Every crack in the concrete, every flaking layer of paint, was a testament to a time when hope had been traded away for greed and cruelty. Now, as dusk fell and the sky bruised into twilight, it was here that the final confrontation awaited, a culmination of years of desperate searching, quiet despair, and a burning need for justice. Thomas's heart pounded in his chest like a relentless drumbeat, its rhythm echoing the tumult of emotions churning within him. Elena's steady presence at his side provided a rare beacon of calm amid the storm of his thoughts. They had come so far together, unearthing one grim clue after another, piecing together the labyrinthine network that had stolen so many innocent lives. Every step along the winding corridors of their investigation had led them inexorably to this moment, a moment when the tangled threads of exploitation, loss, and betrayal would finally be laid bare. With a shared nod that spoke of unspoken resolve, they pushed through a side door that creaked ominously as it swung open. The interior of the warehouse was a vast, cavernous space where light fought vainly against encroaching shadows. The air was thick with the smell of oil and decay, and the floor, littered with debris, bore the scars of years of neglect. Every footstep echoed with a hollow sound, as if the building itself mourned the lives that had passed through its threshold. They moved cautiously through the labyrinth of corridors, the beam of Elena's flashlight slicing through the darkness like a sliver of hope. Along the walls, peeling posters and faded signs hinted at past activities, cryptic references to arrivals, transfers, and reunions that now took on a sinister meaning. Each turn in the winding hallways intensified the foreboding atmosphere, as though the very structure of the place was designed to hide and protect the worst of human deeds. At the heart of the building, past a narrow passage lined with rusted storage lockers and discarded boxes, they discovered a heavy metal door, its surface scarred by years of use. Behind it lay a large room that vibrated with an eerie, low hum, a sound that set their nerves on edge. Thomas's hand trembled as he reached for the cold metal knob, each heartbeat marking the passage of time since Shadow had vanished all those years ago. There was no turning back now. Inside the room, the light revealed a scene that was as heartbreaking as it was shocking. Against one wall, huddled in a makeshift pen, was a small group of dogs. Their eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and resignation, flickered towards Thomas and Elena with a desperate, silent plea. Thomas's breath caught in his throat as he recognized a familiar glimmer, a spark of recognition in one pair of amber eyes. There, amid the crowd of forlorn animals, lay Shadow. The dog's once vibrant coat was now dulled by hardship, and his posture spoke of a life marred by neglect and abuse. Yet, despite the hardships, there was an unmistakable resilience in his gaze, a quiet defiance that mirrored the unwavering determination of his owner. For a long, suspended moment, time itself seemed to pause. Thomas's mind flooded with memories of the gentle, unassuming creature that had once been the heartbeat of his existence, the small dog who had filled his home with warmth and joy, whose playful antics and steady companionship had made every day a little brighter. The sight of Shadow now, caged and scarred by years of suffering, tore at the fabric of Thomas's soul. It was a reunion marked not by unbridled joy, but by a profound, aching sorrow, a recognition that the passage of time had changed everything. Elena stepped forward with measured caution, her voice soft yet resolute as she addressed a figure emerging from the shadows. A man, gaunt and haggard, with eyes that held the weight of countless regrets, stood near the far wall. He had been one of the network's enforcers, a reluctant cog in a monstrous machine that trafficked in stolen lives. His expression was one of defeat and remorse, as though the enormity of his crimes had finally caught up with him. In his hand, he clutched a set of keys, their metallic jingle a cruel reminder of the captivity in which these innocent creatures had been forced. I never wanted it to be like this," he stammered, his voice barely audible above the low hum that filled the room. "I was only following orders. I lost sight of what was right, of the lives we were breaking." His confession, fraught with contrition, did little to erase the pain etched on the faces of the animals or the deep, raw anguish in Thomas's eyes. Thomas took a step forward, the years of searching and suffering boiling over into a torrent of emotion. "You took them from their families," he said, his voice rough with barely contained fury and grief. "You took away our loved ones, our friends, and you call that following orders?" His words, though measured, carried the weight of a broken heart and a soul scoured by betrayal. The man's gaze dropped to the floor, his remorse palpable in the silence that followed. Elena moved to secure the room, her practiced efficiency ensuring that no escape was possible for those who had once trafficked in cruelty. As she radioed for backup, Thomas knelt beside Shadow, gently reaching out a trembling hand. The dog's eyes met his, and in that silent exchange, a flood of memories and emotion surged forth, years of separation, longing, and unyielding hope that had somehow withstood the ravages of time. Shadow's fur, though matted and thin, still retained a softness that spoke of a time when love had enveloped every inch of his being. Tears blurred Thomas's vision as he whispered, "I'm here, boy. I'm here now." The reunion was not marked by exuberant leaps or joyful barks, but by a deep, almost unbearable sorrow, a mourning for lost years and a longing for what could never be restored. In that moment, the room seemed to vibrate with the weight of unspoken stories, tales of families torn apart, of love sacrificed on the altar of profit, and of a world where the most vulnerable were cast aside without a second thought. The enforcer, overcome with guilt, slowly sank to his knees in the corner. I'll tell you everything," he pleaded, his voice cracking with the burden of his complicity. "The network, it's bigger than you can imagine. They operate in shadows, across borders, across cities. We were just the middlemen, the ones who never had a choice." His words spilled out in a torrent of regret, each confession peeling away the layers of the monstrous operation that had stolen so many lives. As the minutes stretched into an eternity, Elena joined Thomas at his side, her eyes scanning the room for any remaining evidence of the network's cruelty. The enforcer's account painted a picture of a sprawling operation that stretched from forgotten industrial districts to the glitzy facades of international cities, a network that exploited the desperate, preyed upon the lonely, and commodified love in its rawest form. Every detail he provided was a dagger that drove further into the heart of Thomas's anguish, each revelation a reminder that the reunion he had dreamed of was marred by an injustice so vast it threatened to consume him entirely. Yet, even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Thomas felt a renewed surge of determination. In the face of this overwhelming cruelty, his reunion with Shadow became a symbol, not just of the love he had lost, but of the unyielding hope that had sustained him through the darkest days. He resolved that the truth would be exposed, that the network's atrocities would not remain hidden in the shadows. This was not merely a personal quest for redemption, but a crusade for all those who had suffered in silence. In the hours that followed, as law enforcement arrived to secure the scene and begin the arduous process of dismantling the network, Thomas stayed by Shadow's side. The dog, though weakened by years of neglect, nuzzled into his hand, a silent acknowledgement of a bond that had endured despite the ravages of time and cruelty. Elena's steady presence and the enforcer's reluctant cooperation provided a glimmer of hope that, perhaps, the nightmare would finally end. The warehouse, with all its grim secrets, was transformed from a repository of despair into a stage for the possibility of justice. Over the next several days, the story of the hidden network made headlines, a dark exposé of a system that had trafficked in lost souls and shattered families. Investigations were launched in multiple jurisdictions, and families of missing pets finally began to receive the closure they had longed for over the years. Thomas found himself at the center of a media frenzy, yet his only focus was on the recovery and rehabilitation of Shadow and the many other animals who had suffered at the hands of the ruthless network. In a modest veterinary clinic far from the chaos of the city's underbelly, Shadow underwent a thorough examination. The scars of his ordeal were evident, bruises that had long since faded, a coat that had lost much of its luster, and eyes that carried the weight of untold stories. Yet, as the veterinarian gently treated him, there was a spark in those eyes, a resilience that defied the cruelty he had endured. Thomas sat silently in the corner, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with the bittersweet aroma of hope. Each passing moment was a reminder of both the harsh realities of the past and the possibility of healing in the future. As news of the investigation spread, communities once shattered by the loss of their beloved pets began to come together in solidarity. Meetings were held, vigils were organized, and support networks emerged to help families reclaim what had been stolen from them. Thomas, whose life had been irrevocably altered by the disappearance of his loyal friend, became a reluctant spokesperson for the cause. He spoke of the unyielding bond between humans and their pets, of the need for vigilance in protecting those who could not speak for themselves, and of the deep, enduring love that transcended even the darkest of circumstances. In one particularly poignant moment, during a community memorial for the missing animals, Thomas stood before a crowd of tearful faces. His voice, though laden with sorrow, carried an undeniable strength. "We have been robbed of more than just time," he said, his words resonating with raw emotion. "We have lost a part of our hearts. But in every lost gaze, in every wagging tail that still holds on to hope, there is a promise that we will never let cruelty define our love. Today, we reclaim not just our pets, but our dignity, our compassion, and our right to a world where love is cherished above profit." The memorial was a turning point, a catharsis that united a community once divided by despair. As the days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, the once hidden network began to crumble under the weight of relentless investigations and public outcry. The enforcer, whose confession had been the key to unlocking the network's secrets, cooperated with authorities and provided crucial evidence that led to a series of arrests. The dismantling of the trafficking ring was a painstaking process, marked by courtroom battles, tearful testimonies, and the slow, deliberate march toward justice. Through it all, Thomas remained a quiet pillar of strength. Every day, as he cared for Shadow and worked to rebuild the trust that had been shattered by years of separation, he found solace in the small acts of kindness that now defined his life. The reunion with Shadow, though marred by the scars of the past, was also a testament to the enduring nature of love, a love that refused to be extinguished by the darkness of exploitation. There were long, reflective nights when Thomas would sit on the back porch of his modest home, a place that had once felt empty and silent, and watch as the stars emerged one by one against the velvet sky. In those quiet moments, as the gentle hum of the night replaced the clamor of the city, he allowed himself to remember. He remembered the sound of Shadow's paws on the wooden floor, the warmth of the dog's small body pressed against him during cold nights, and the unspoken promise that no matter how far life led them apart, the bond they shared would always be a guiding light in even the darkest of times. The process of healing was slow and measured. Shadow, once fragile and timid, began to regain his strength with each passing day. Under the careful watch of dedicated veterinarians and the unwavering love of Thomas, the dog's eyes gradually shone with a renewed spark of life. There were days when Thomas would take Shadow for long walks through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, each step a quiet affirmation that hope had returned to his world. The gentle rustling of leaves, the soft murmur of friendly greetings from neighbors, and the reassuring cadence of familiar sounds all served as a reminder that life, despite its many hardships, could be reclaimed and rebuilt. Elena, too, found a new purpose in the wake of their shared ordeal. She dedicated herself to advocating for animal welfare, speaking at community centers, and working with local organizations to ensure that the atrocities they had uncovered would never be allowed to happen again. Her quiet determination and compassionate nature resonated deeply with those who had once felt isolated by their grief. In her speeches and heartfelt interviews, Elena spoke of the resilience of the human spirit, of the transformative power of love, and of the need to protect the most vulnerable among us from the predations of a callous world. As autumn descended upon the city, painting the streets in hues of amber and gold, Thomas often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this place. The long, winding road, from the quiet suburban days marked by simple routines to the harsh realities of urban decay and clandestine networks, had been fraught with pain, betrayal, and heart-wrenching loss. And yet, in the midst of that darkness, there had been moments of unexpected beauty, a shared smile between strangers, a gentle hand reaching out in solidarity, and the quiet, unwavering love of a small dog who had never given up on the promise of reunion. On one particularly crisp evening, as the chill of autumn crept into the bones of the city, Thomas and Elena met one last time at the park where it had all begun, a familiar place that now stood as a symbol of both loss and hope. The park, with its time-worn benches and ancient oak trees, was bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Families strolled along winding paths, children laughed in the fading light, and for a brief, suspended moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift. In that serene tableau, Thomas watched Shadow, who now trotted happily at his side, his once scarred eyes shining with quiet joy. The reunion, though marked by deep scars and painful memories, had become a beacon of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of love that could survive even the most harrowing of journeys. Standing there, amidst the rustle of falling leaves and the soft cadence of whispered promises, Thomas realized that his journey had transformed him in ways he had never imagined. The search for Shadow had been a quest for a missing pet, but it had evolved into something far greater, a crusade for justice, a fight against exploitation, and an affirmation of the unbreakable bond between humans and the creatures they hold dear. Each memory, each tear shed along the way, had contributed to a mosaic of hope that now shone with a quiet, steadfast light. In the days that followed, as the trials against those responsible for the network unfolded in public courtrooms and the media chronicled the shocking details of the hidden operation, Thomas found solace in the small, everyday acts of love that now defined his life. He would often sit by the window of his modest home, watching as the world outside continued its ceaseless dance, a dance of joy and sorrow, of beginnings and endings. And in those moments of quiet reflection, he understood that while the scars of the past might never fully fade, they could serve as a reminder of the strength that had been forged in the crucible of loss. As winter crept in, blanketing the city in a serene layer of snow and ice, Thomas and Shadow forged a new rhythm, a quiet, steady cadence of life rebuilt from the ashes of despair. The once dark corridors of that warehouse, now emblematic of a long-forgotten horror, became distant memories replaced by the warmth of human connection and the enduring loyalty of a small, resilient dog. In every shared glance between Thomas and Shadow, in every gentle caress and quiet moment of understanding, there was a silent vow that no matter how deep the wounds of the past, the promise of love and renewal would always shine through. In the final analysis of their journey, Thomas understood that the reunion, however bittersweet, was not merely an end but a beginning of healing, of rebuilding trust, and of forging a future where the vulnerability of the heart was celebrated rather than exploited. The long, painful quest for justice had taken him to the depths of human cruelty, but it had also revealed the transcendent nature of love, a love that, even when battered by the harshest storms, refused to be extinguished. As the first signs of spring emerged, melting the last remnant of winter's chill, Thomas took one final walk with Shadow along the familiar paths of their neighborhood park. The air was alive with the promise of renewal, the soft murmur of new leaves, and the gentle chirping of birds created a symphony of hope that resonated deeply within him. In that moment, with the warmth of the sun caressing his face and the soft, comforting presence of Shadow at his side, Thomas felt that the long, arduous journey had at last reached its quiet, bittersweet conclusion, a conclusion that, while tinged with the scars of yesterday, glowed with the promise of a tomorrow where love, justice, and hope could finally find their rightful place. Thus, as dusk fell one evening over the city that had witnessed both unspeakable sorrow and the quiet triumph of resilience, Thomas sat on a weathered park bench beneath a sprawling oak. Shadows lengthened around him, but the glow in his heart burned with a steadfast light. The journey had taken him to the darkest corners of human nature, where the exploitation of the innocent had been laid bare for the world to see. And yet, through it all, the simple, enduring love for a small dog had guided him, a love that had never wavered, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. In that soft, reflective twilight, Thomas's eyes met those of Shadow, whose gaze was calm and knowing, a silent affirmation that despite the pain and loss, a bond unbreakable by time or cruelty could indeed survive. And in that sacred, unspoken moment, amidst the gentle rustle of leaves and the fading light of day, Thomas understood that the true victory lay not in the dismantling of a corrupt network or in the public accolades of justice, but in the quiet, unwavering redemption found in the reunion of souls long separated by fate. For Thomas, the reunion with Shadow was the culmination of a journey marked by loss, heartache, and the slow, deliberate process of healing. It was a journey that had taken him across the boundaries of despair and back into the warmth of hope, a journey that, despite all the darkness, had ultimately reaffirmed the power of love. In every careful step, every tear shed in solitude, there was the promise of a new beginning. And as the night deepened and the stars emerged, a silent vow resonated in the stillness, that the bond between a man and his loyal companion would forever serve as a beacon against the encroaching darkness, a reminder that even in a world scarred by cruelty, love remained the most potent force of all. In the final chapters of this arduous journey, Thomas and Elena continued to work tirelessly to ensure that the scars of the past would not be forgotten. Their collaboration with law enforcement, animal rights advocates, and the community at large not only led to the dismantling of the trafficking network but also paved the way for new legislation designed to protect the most vulnerable among us. The courtroom battles were long and fraught with emotional testimony, but every word spoken in defense of those who had suffered contributed to a growing chorus demanding accountability. As the judicial process unfolded, it became clear that the pursuit of justice was not an end in itself, but a means of honoring the memory of every lost life and mending the fragile bonds that connected a community in mourning. Thomas, though forever changed by his experiences, found strength in the small acts of kindness that now defined his days. Each time Shadow's tail gave a gentle wag or his eyes reflected a glimmer of trust, it was a silent reminder that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. The relentless pursuit of truth and justice had cost him dearly, years of worry, sleepless nights, and moments of agonizing uncertainty, but it had also led him to a place where hope could finally take root once more. In time, the story of the missing dog, the unyielding investigation, and the eventual reunion became a symbol of resilience, a narrative that inspired countless others who had faced their own battles with loss and despair. Community centers held memorials, local media recounted the tale with a mixture of sorrow and admiration, and families once separated by tragedy found solace in the knowledge that they were not alone. The legacy of that painful journey was etched into the fabric of the city, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of unwavering love. As spring deepened into summer, the park where Thomas and Shadow often walked transformed into a vibrant canvas of life. Children's laughter, the hum of busy conversations, and the soft rustling of leaves became the background to a quiet revolution of healing and renewal. In this landscape of everyday miracles, the once fragmented pieces of broken lives began to coalesce into a tapestry of shared hope, a tapestry in which every heart, no matter how scarred, had a part to play. On one sun-dappled afternoon, as the golden light filtered through the trees and danced upon the soft, green grass, Thomas sat beside Shadow under their favorite oak. In the gentle warmth of that moment, every hardship of the past seemed to melt away, replaced by the vibrant promise of tomorrow. Thomas's eyes, which had once been shadowed by grief, now shone with quiet determination and an unyielding belief in the future. And as Shadow leaned his head against Thomas's leg, a simple act of trust and love, it was clear that the reunion, with all its heartbreaking history, had ultimately given way to a new chapter defined by resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of connection. In the final measure of their long and painful journey, Thomas understood that every tear shed, every moment of despair, had been a stepping stone toward this fragile, yet indomitable, hope. The road ahead was uncertain, and the wounds of the past would never fully disappear, but in the presence of Shadow's gentle warmth and the solidarity of a community united by shared loss and healing, there was a promise that the future could indeed be transformed. And so, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Thomas and Shadow walked side by side along the winding path of their neighborhood, a path that wound through memories of sorrow and joy alike. Each step was a silent testament to the truth that love, though tested by time and tempered by loss, could conquer even the darkest of adversities. In the gentle cadence of their footsteps, in the soft murmur of the wind through the trees, there was a promise that the scars of the past would serve not as markers of defeat, but as reminders of a journey that had forged unbreakable bonds and kindled the flame of hope in the heart of a man who had once lost everything. In that endless dance between memory and renewal, Thomas found the strength to move forward, carrying the lessons of the past, honoring the lives that had been lost, and embracing the love that had ultimately brought him home. And as the night embraced the city in a quiet, solemn hush, the stars above bore silent witness to a reunion that, though marked by pain and loss, shone with the enduring light of redemption and the timeless promise of love.